You mentioned about the stations of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could talk more about that and in relationship to how a living Sufi master can awaken you and take you through the stations of the heart.
Yes. The Sufis understood that there are these chambers within the heart. And mostly they say there are 5. And so the Sufi journey, if there is a spiritual journey, and the Sufi is often referred to as the wayfarer or the traveler on the path, is a journey within the heart. And there are practices that a teacher will give you to activate they're called lataif, these specific chambers within the heart. On the particular Sufi path to which I belong, we don't have specific practices, we just work with the energy of love. And love is infused into the heart chakra, which is the central spiritual organ, or the organ of divine consciousness within the human being. This actually relates to the mystical understanding, about which I actually, believe it or not, recently wrote a blog on the Huffington Post, which is a remarkable thing to write about anything esoteric on, but and if you ever come across this strange phenomena called blogging, probably our generation is not so familiar with it, but I was introduced to it recently. And the understanding, esoteric understanding, that just as you have a physical body, you have a spiritual body. And the purpose of the physical body is to live in this physical world. And, for example, you can spiritually see how the light of the soul, or the soul, comes into the fetus, and it happens at 3 months, and then develops or grows a physical body, which then you're born into this world, so the soul can have experiences in this physical world, because the soul as itself is just a center of light. It doesn't have a physical body. And so that's in a way the journey of descent. And then there is the return journey, which is most people just have a completely physical, mental, emotional experience in this world. And this world, as you well know, provides ample opportunity for that. One might say it provides too much opportunity for that. And there are souls who, maybe they've had enough of those experiences and they got a little bit bored, and they think there must be more to life than this. There's actually a very nice story about this, because my teacher, Mrs. Tweedy, was once interviewed in Germany by a young man from a German newspaper. And a friend of mine who was present at this interview was quite surprised because how she spoke to this young man. Because she spoke about her life before the war and how she lived in a hotel in Switzerland with her husband, who was an English banker, and she went dancing every night, and her husband never knew what color her hair would be when he came back from work, and all of this life of living in a hotel in Switzerland and in the 30s and all of that. And he spoke to her about, she spoke to him about all of that. And my friend was, really shocked. And he said, you're a spiritual teacher, Why do you talk to him about this very worldly life you used to live? She used to write for a Vogue magazine or something, and lived that whole life. And she said to him, she said to him, look, eat, drink, make love to your wife, enjoy life, enjoy it to the full, and then one day something in you will wake up and say there must be more to life than this. And then, only then, you begin to look for something else. And so then, that is the time that then you want a vehicle to live a spiritual life. And what I realized, and why I actually wrote this blog in the Huffington Post, was because I realized that somehow that piece of information, a lot of these spiritual traditions, Sufi and other traditions, came to America in the 70s. And it seemed that a lot of them didn't describe that essential piece of information. A lot of spirituality got caught up in the self-development movement and became just another way to discover who you really are, without this very simple kind of technological information that belongs to all esoteric traditions, that just as you have a physical body, so you have a spiritual body. And it's a kind of body made of light. And if you want to have experiences in the spiritual worlds, and as far as I can work out, for most people there are like 7 planes of reality, and you start here on plane number 1, and you can go into all these other planes. You need a spiritual body, a body made of light. So there are esoteric practices, whether in Kabbalah, in Sufism, in Taoism, and even in esoteric Christianity before the Catholic Church got rid of it. There are practices to help you to develop this body of light. And it becomes a slightly different, the Sufis made these things of the chambers of the heart, and it is a slightly different body depending on which of these levels of consciousness you need to access. And so generally you go from, through the chambers of the heart into the... I think the nicest one I always say is the third, which the Sufis call seer, the secret, which is this place in the heart of complete love and complete oneness. And afterwards they get a bit frightening. But the Sufis have developed this technique of giving you what you need to access this plane of reality, which is, I think, what is known in India as the Atma. I don't know if that's right. The secret is the Atma, or the plane of the soul, which is a state of bliss. In the Indian tradition, they talk about Anandamaya Kosha, which is the bliss, the sheath of the soul, which is bliss. And so you get experiences of bliss, you get experiences of peace, you get experiences of love, oneness. But in order to do that, you first of all, it's getting a bit technical, but you first of all have to purify yourself to a certain degree, because in order to develop the spiritual body, you need to have purified, not completely, but you need to have purified it to a certain degree. One can't be too pure, but and then you do these practices, whichever tradition you're drawn to, that help, breathing practices, for example, or visualizations in some Buddhist traditions, or the Sufis have whole elaborate practices that help you develop these different bodies, and it's great. Then you have this whole other experience which takes you not beyond the physical world, but take you in a way, because the physical world is the densest, takes you within the physical world to the other realities. And that's why I said there's usually just one person in the world who's had the real experience. It's quite a lot to do. And it's, first of all, you have to decide that this is something you really want to do, and then you have to find a teacher, or traditionally the teacher finds you to help you to do it. And that's kind of this esoteric hidden tradition which belongs to all. There's a nice line in the Bible when, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light, which refers to that, which is, of course, the single eye of the heart, the single eye of pure consciousness. Then you have this body of light, thy whole body shall be full of light. And the Sufis have all this traveling in the inner worlds. Yeah.
In the next 5 years or so, the feminine energy as a whole for humanity and the earth is continuing to grow. And when I look or listened to today speak about oneness, and I incorporate that with the understanding I have, small understanding I have with the receptive energy of the feminine, and openness and letting go. And I'm wondering what your vision is as far as that shift of oneness and the embracing of the feminine with this softer energy, how that will all manifest in this very male patriarchal current environment.
Wow. You can settle in for a few days now, I imagine. Well, this is the reason that I recently published, together with my wife's help, this book called The Return of the Feminine and the World Soul. Because I was given a set of teachings and understandings that the feminine is absolutely vital for the next step in human evolution. There's a certain work that can only be done by women on a very basic spiritual way. And women have access to a certain energy in creation that men do not. It is because physically they have the capacity to bring the light of the soul into the physical world by giving birth. It gives them access to energy in the created world that is needed if the world is to transform. And as far as I can understand, that is the primary reason that so many women in the West are attracted to spiritual life. Yes, you can say because there is this anger against the patriarchy, there is this brutality of the culture here, the feminine has been treated so badly. But on a deeper level, it's because there is a certain spiritual work that can only be done by women. I always remember when I started reading esoteric books, I was 16, and I had a girlfriend then who was an artist. And I remember this afternoon, it was an English summer afternoon, and I was sitting there on the lawn reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead and The Secret of the Golden Flower, getting really terribly excited. And she looked at me, and she said, "What are you reading all that for? I just know it." And there is this innate wisdom of the feminine that doesn't have to read the books about global transformation, which is really lucky because, first of all, the books haven't been written. Secondly, the few that have been written are written by guys and are very biased. And the woman has in her cellular structure the knowledge, the imprint of how creation should evolve, because she is part of creation in a way that a man isn't. And she is part of the mystery of life. The Sufis call it the secret of the word kun, to be, the immanence of God. And she needs to be because the process of conception and birth is a spirit which only human beings have access to and only women have access to, is so beautiful and so tremendous. To bring the light of the soul into a human body and to give that body, give that soul the form it needs for its life's destiny. It's not just something you pick off the supermarket shelf. It is an incredibly beautiful spiritual work. I've had the opportunity of actually seeing how it happens, particularly in my grandchildren. So I have been shown how there is a certain work that needs to be done by women. I've also seen that the anger of women towards the patriarchy is a very, very big stumbling block to this. And there is not enough time, sadly, for the reconciliation, which would take, I guess, a couple of 100 years on a good day. If you've been beaten up for a couple of 1,000 years, you can't just wake up one morning and say, "It's okay, guy, it doesn't matter." But you have to respect what has happened. Don't deny it. But say there is a more pressing need at this time, which is, and I also think it will be done by groups of women coming together. I'm quite convinced in this. Because that is how women have always worked. Women never had the same hierarchical structures as men. Even in the ancient esoteric traditions of women, they came together in circles and they shared. And in that sharing, a certain magic is passed from woman to woman, from body to body, from spirit to spirit. and something else becomes present. And then there is this organic connection that is needed, I called it a web of light when I saw it, that is needed to help rejuvenate the spiritual structure of the world, which is dying. Just because we are dying physically, we are also dying spiritually. And there's nothing the guys can do about it. They have plans, but they have no understanding of it. So, in a way, the women hold the fate of the world in their hands in a very particular way, but the shadow side of it is that they are so angry with men for this incredible betrayal and misuse that can cut them off from the work that needs to be done. And also there is, I don't know if I should talk about this. There is a misunderstanding about spiritual work of women. And I suppose it has to do with the fact that the early initiations of women that, for example, happened at Eleusis for 2,000 years in Greece, they were never written down, they're not recorded. And women in the West who are attracted to that work, they have concocted a set of images which they feel belong to the wisdom of the feminine, but are incomplete. And they've taken this image of the goddess, and which is fine in itself, but it is missing a certain spark of transformation that is needed. And I don't know why this happened. It's difficult for me because I went to boarding school. So from the age of 7 to the age of 17, I was just in the company of men. I had nothing to do with women. I had sisters, but they were at home in the holidays. I had nothing to do with men. Then I went to the East, and then I came back, and then I met Mrs. Tweedy. And Mrs. Tweedy was complete as a woman. Complete, so complete as a woman, she had no time for any discussions about feminism. It didn't interest her at all. There was actually a conference that she went to in Zurich, which was a women's conference. She went there by mistake. And she started talking about her experience in India at the hand of her teacher and how cruel and hard he was. And everybody got so angry because they said, how could you let a man treat you like this? And they had no awareness of this whole other spiritual tradition. And so she never had time for feminism because she said the real liberation is the liberation from the ego. But she was complete and she honored the feminine completely. And to such a degree, you didn't even argue about it. There was no question about it. And there was also another wonderful woman who was there about the same age. Remember, I was like 19. She was already in her 60s. And I stayed there, until I came to America when I was 39 or something. And there was another wonderful woman called Margaret Sampson who was also completely true to herself as a woman. Completely liberated in a way that patriarchy didn't have a look in. And so I grew up really in this company of women who were completely true to the feminine from the depths of its spiritual perspective. And, she'd been sent by her teacher from India to do a certain work in the West that I'm convinced could only be done by a woman, because a certain energy had to be brought to the West and actually brought into the cellular structure of the West, which she did first in England, then in 87 she brought it to America. I don't think a man can do that. I think it's always belonged to the goddess, because the goddess has an understanding of the sacred energy of the cellular structure of life and how it works, and how you can infuse it with a different vibration so it can hold a spiritual frequency. And so in a way, I've been brought up in that tradition, not because there were any books, not because she didn't talk about it. I just sat in her presence day after day, and it was there. And she was a completely liberated human being who lived that essence of spiritual transmission that belongs to a woman. And I saw it happen. And I saw things come alive in a way they couldn't come alive otherwise. And a lot of what goes under the image of feminine spirituality in the West is lacking this essential ingredient. Now, I don't know why. I haven't looked at it carefully enough. You smell if it's there, because if it's there, something in you completely bows down before it. Even as a man, you don't argue with that spiritual energy. It is the grace of God. But there's a grace of God that can only come through a woman. And through a woman, it can go into the earth, it can hold something into the earth. And if there is going to be any global spiritual evolution, something has to change in the cellular structure of the world, because it has to hold a new vibration of divine consciousness, of consciousness. So, I mean, if you see it happen, it's incredibly beautiful. That's why the Sufis talk about the secret of the word kun, to be. And it's interesting if you go back, and that's why I was very moved that Ibn al-Arabi, who was one of the greatest Sufi teachers, one of his early teachers was a woman, and his wife, his first wife, Miriam, was actually also a Sufi and had many experiences. And you see that in the early years of Sufism. You see that the feminine was completely included spiritually and completely respected. He met in Mecca another woman who had an incredible influence on him spiritually. So, yes, there is a work of vital importance that belongs to the feminine and also belongs to women. And I pray that it gets done, because unfortunately, you would have thought the guys made the mess, guys should clear it up. That's logic, right? I mean, we made a real mess. I mean, ecologically, you look around, you think, oh my God. But if you see what we did spiritually, it would, you just cry for weeks. I mean, what we did to the feminine, let alone, should be hung, drawn, and quartered every day. Particularly in America. I mean, they actually committed genocide, spiritual genocide, against the spiritual tradition and the spiritual forefathers of this land. So in 10 years, they got rid of the buffalo. I mean, wow. The sacred animal that sustained a whole nation and all the prayers and everything. They should be put out to pasture and then just shot off. But we don't have time for that. And there have to be somewhere this reconnection with this ancient feminine tradition. And that's why we published this book as a kind of pointer in that direction. It also has to do with the world soul and reawakening of the world soul. Just one last point. You talked about the feminine being gentle. I don't think Kali is known for her gentle nature. I think you've got to be very careful about pigeonholing the feminine. She doesn't like it. We don't know what would really happen if the goddess got angry. There was a little eruption today in Iceland. There have been a few earthquakes in the last little bit. It is very, very, the goddess is very, very dangerous. At least you know what a guy is going to do. He has a plan. And, with the feminine, you have no idea what she has up her sleeve. Yeah? I'm sorry I kind of got carried away with that. But
Thank you.
yes, you want to tell something? You have the microphone there.
Just to kind of follow through what you're saying, yeah, I understand the earth in a sense is dying, but isn't there also simultaneously this cleansing, and that, I believe, I'd like to believe anyway, that the universe, or that energy is kind of nudging women to...
Yeah, absolutely.
And that will support you in this.
How many women were present at Copenhagen? How many heads of state were women who decided the fate of the world? How many women got nudged in the right direction? You know...
But I have to tie something else into
Please,
it. Because
please,
I've
please.
not heard you mention about this whole evolutionary shift that's going on in 2012.
Oh yeah,
You know,
2012.
Not that hard date.
Absolutely. You got your watches set.
Sorry?
Don't have any long-term investments.
Well, yeah. I think that process has been going on for some time.
Yeah.
The end date is what it is. But I hear the concern about, hopefully women really becoming aware and actively working to
Empowerment, yes. Real feminine empowerment.
Yeah.
Real feminine spiritual empowerment.
So do you believe that the universe and the feminine energy are helping? I mean, is there two different shifts?
Well, I think they go together, and I think humanity is always given an opportunity to make a step. The question is whether it will take that opportunity. And that's what concerns me, because that's why I just hope and pray that people come together in the right way, to hold something, to pass it from hand to hand, from heart to heart. It doesn't take a lot. It's never taken a lot. But it takes a certain sincerity of heart. And then it can happen. Yeah, then it will be very, very beautiful. That is what I think many of us, I sense, have incarnated at this time to work towards. It is like a collective spiritual destiny to hold that. Is it a slam dunk, like they say in America? No. That's all. Yeah.
I'd just like to add something when you spoke about empowerment for women. What is most important is that the empowerment doesn't come through the same language that has been infused by masculine values all this time. This empowerment has to come from a completely different place and deep place within the feminine, then that responds to life, connect to life completely in a true sense that was somehow being diverted after 2,000 years of being infused by masculine values and everything else that came with it. So I think when one speaks on empowerment, it's so easy to go into the same mode of the masculine way of thinking, masculine way of behaving. And I think the sense of empowerment should come, it's a different way of being reconnecting to woman, what is really mean to be a woman. And one of it is this lovely lady who asked this question about the connection about the love and receptivity. And I think this is one aspect, that receptivity is also a form of empowerment, as we never thought of it maybe this way.